Wow, can you believe we're already 6 weeks into the football season? It seemed like just yesterday we were getting geared up for week one. We didn't know what any teams were going to look like, and now we have a really good idea. On my picks, I could have swapped South Haven and Webb. I had them flip-flopped anyways. I had Christian Community not doing as well as they've been doing so far. Some of my teams are still on point. Lancaster's doing all right. I'm talking here because I want to jump straight into the interview just as soon as y'all hear this right here. Enjoy the show. Psych! Hey everyone, welcome into Extreme Talk. My name is James Shannon. You thought we were going straight into the interview, didn't you? Well, you're right. We still are going to go straight into the interview, but make sure you tune in next week. I'm going to break down playoff scenarios, and they'll be a lot clearer after tomorrow night's game, so you are not going to want to miss that episode of Extreme Talk. Without further ado, I turn it over to, myself, talking to Mr. Hank St. Denis from the NHSA. Hey everyone, I'm really excited about the guest that I have on this week. He's Mr. Hank St. Denis. He's the director of the NHSA, and he helps run the 8-man football tournament that they host every year down in Panama City, Florida. It's typically the second weekend of the month, but 8-man football from Tennessee has a long history of going down there. But Mr. St. Denis, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk.
Glad to be here.
So for everyone who's not familiar with maybe either the tournament or what you guys do, just give everyone a little bit of a background about the NHSA and how the tournament came to be, and then maybe talk a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got involved with hosting 8-man football tournaments.
I started back in, I think with homeschool football. At that particular time, there wasn't much in the way of homeschool football. The reasons I was involved in it was I run a homeschool convention, have for 25 years, and for the most part was looking to provide an opportunity for homeschool kids to play football, but knew that would probably need to reach out to some Christian schools to see if they might be interested in students being able to play as well. And then became a situation where after a couple of years of playing overseas and that type of thing, looked to do something on a postseason basis. I was down in Panama City during the summer and ran across a Christian resort down there, which basically houses youth groups during the summer, college students, and it was ideal because it had a lot of different type rooms, hotel rooms, suites, small houses, dorms. It would be a great venue for housing a tournament. And then, of course, the weather in Panama City is generally still pretty nice, and so figured that would be a good opportunity to host a tournament for 8-man, 11-man teams. When we started, it was a case where I had a number of 11-man teams that I had been partly involved with and organized their teams, and then homeschool football back in the early 2000s, we played 8-man. And so we knew that there was opportunity there in terms of for a tournament.
Now, another tournament that a lot of people have heard about, and they don't do 8-man football anymore, just 11, but another tournament a lot of people know about is the NACA tournament that was hosted, or the 11-man that's still hosted in Dayton, Tennessee, up at Fort Bluff Camp, with the NACA sports running that. Did you know anything about that tournament? Was it any kind of inspiration, or did you know anything about it?
I did. there with a team back in 2005. At that particular time, we actually moved from 8-man to 11-man, and so from a standpoint of saying, okay, well, they don't do 11-man, so look to do the 11-man tournament, and that's sort of what an 11-man tournament as opposed to the 8-man. Again, after a couple of years, had teams that asked about doing 8-man.
Now, I know the first few years you guys did 8-man homeschool football, and then a few years ago you decided to let private schools come in or Christian schools and participate in the tournament. And of course, there's been a little bit of a decline in homeschool 8-man teams, or some of the ones like the Memphis Nighthawks, some of the ones who were 8-man switched to 11-man and started participating in that version of the tournament. So was it a difficult decision to kind of open it to the Christian schools and private schools from it being homeschool, of course, with homeschool being in the name NHSA? Well, was that kind of a difficult decision, or how did that come about? And was there any pushback to that?
Well, in actuality, in terms of looking across the country at homeschool 8-man teams and Christian school 8-man teams, obvious that there are not a lot of 8-man homeschool teams, and so therefore open it up to both Christian school and homeschool teams in order to have a large enough pool of teams to invite to the tournament. So that's kind of where it started.
Now, you guys, of course, you have teams from all over the country. You've had a team from California. Actually, had a couple teams a few years ago come down. A team from Bakersfield, California, and then of course a lot of teams here in the mid-state. You got teams from Mississippi, Alabama, all these different states coming together to play in this tournament. But in terms of other states who maybe their playoffs go past that, do you think that the quality of the tournament, because obviously it's always a great tournament, y'all have had some great championship games the last few years. Not being biased because Tennessee teams have been in it, but y'all have had some great championship games over the last couple of years. Do you think that maybe if a Georgia, because of course Georgia playoffs extend past the tournament, so do you think maybe if some Georgia teams that maybe won the title or runners up, if they could be involved, do you think it would just raise the bar of the tournament?
Well, in actuality, we the first couple of years we actually had Georgia 8-man teams coming. We had 2 8-man Georgia teams. We had a North Carolina 8-man team, of course, Alabama, Tennessee, and then Georgia got to be so big in terms of their 8-man league. They start the week that our tournament starts. So, unfortunately, their tournament runs into sort of the end of or Thanksgiving or the week after, depending upon how many teams make the playoffs. But really, it is 8-man has exploded in Georgia. Teams that were originally homeschool teams becoming sort of hybrid Christian schools in this Christian school league that had started down here. It's really exploded in terms of the number of teams here in Georgia. Carolina has a 8-man league, and as well North Carolina does too. But again, their playoffs start around the same time that our tournament does, so it prohibits some of those teams from coming as well. Obviously we'd like to move it after Thanksgiving, but what's happened, there's so many basketball, these Christian schools that have sort of started at the beginning of November with games and tournaments, that it's really eaten into the number of teams that actually want to continue playing football after the first or second week in November.
Yeah, and that's a problem that I don't know how Georgia league has dealt with it. I know here in Tennessee, it's always a big topic of conversation because the league, the MTAC, so some of us and myself included feel like it needs to become a 16 playoff, but in doing so, you would have to push the season further into November, and then you get basketball coaches and basketball people who want their players and they want to hurry up and get there. And I've talked about it before on the show, but I'm in favor of extending the playoffs. I think football should go into November. But anyways, that's just another topic.
I do want to say this, that it was always sort of a rule that football went through Thanksgiving, and then after that, basketball came on, basketball season. Football season is so long now. If you think about it, they're playing games from November, December, January, February, March. That's more than half of the school year is playing one sport. To me, that's sort of the whole perspective of high school athletics is having one sport dominate in terms of the length of time.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell from school to school which sport is more important because some schools, especially ones that choose maybe to come to your tournament or participate in our All-Star game, which is the same weekend, some of those schools don't have as much importance on basketball. But then in my experience, there's some schools that have no interest at all in participating in those tournaments because they want to hurry up and get their basketball players. But anyway, I'm not going to get off on that tangent. So obviously you guys have a team from California that comes out, the Volunteers, but with 8-man being so big, especially in the Midwest and Kansas and Oklahoma and Nebraska, are there any teams in there that have ever either reached out to y'all or you've reached out to them maybe about coming to the tournament? Maybe I know you have a lot of teams from inside the what would be considered the confines of the Southeastern Conference. But are there teams outside of that have maybe reached out to come to your tournament?
Yes, in fact, we did have a team from Missouri that came a couple of years ago, and they've expressed interest in coming again. We've had several teams from Oklahoma and Kansas have contacted us about coming. So I think it's just a matter of time before they will start coming. Having the one team from Missouri come that one year, certainly they've talked with some other teams out in their conference, and those people have reached out. So I wouldn't be surprised to have a team from out there either this year. It looks like possibly this year coming to the tournament as well.
And I don't know about yourself. I've always been interested in comparing the type of 8-man football that's played maybe here in Tennessee or Alabama or maybe even Louisiana as opposed to in Mississippi, as opposed to the kind in the Midwest where it might be maybe a little bit more old school. I don't know. In your opinion, which one in the experience you've had, which one do you kind of favor? The one, the type of ball played here in the South, or maybe some of the football that's played in the Midwest, or even maybe California?
I think the 8-man game lends itself to the high scoring, and so obviously when you get the top teams, then it really is a mix because they usually play good defense as well as offense up there in the top.
So you think that so like for your championship, you would rather have would you rather have a high scoring game, or would you rather have like a 61-58 like our championship was it last year, or maybe like a 24-20 or something to that effect?
Both. The past couple of years, we've had pretty wide open games. I know last year was a little bit different because it got blown out pretty quickly. But the 2 years previous to that came down to actually the last play of the game, in which teams had scored, and then the other team came back and scored, and the game ended with the team either in a position to score or going for a 2-point conversion. So that was both of those were wide open games. Yeah, it leads to a lot of excitement, a lot of interest, and I think it makes for a better atmosphere, obviously.
Now, if you had to look over the years that you've done the tournament and kind of pick out maybe one specific or a couple teams, maybe one that was the just one that maybe blew your socks off that was really, really good, and then maybe another one that maybe was like a secretly like everyone maybe underestimated them and didn't think they would be as good, and then they really showed up. And then I don't know, it's a couple, maybe a third team that let's go with a different category. A team that was really, really just next level, polite, gentleman. Because obviously teenagers are going to be teenagers, but is there a team that kind of acted beyond their years?
Well, I think in general that the thing that you're looking at is obviously by the end of the year, most teams have played so many games so that they're usually gelling pretty good in terms of hopefully because of the fact that you have that. Obviously, if you get an injury to some crucial people or they can't make a trip, one of your stars can't make the trip or they get injured during the latter half of the year, that may affect a team's performance. But overall, not a real big surprise, not anything that was really out of the ordinary. I thought last year with community coming down there, I thought that they were going to be revved up to do something. I was surprised with Russell Christian. They kind of let it get out of their hands. I don't know if it was a situation where they just weren't sure how to respond once Christian community got up. Sometimes when you get up in an 8-man, you might be a little more risky than you would be because of the amount of points that are scored. And then so you start doing something like you go for something, and next thing you know, the other team's got the ball and scored again. And, things can change in a hurry.
Now, that's actually the perfect segue to my next question. You mentioned Christian Community going down to the tournament last year. And as everyone up here knows, they didn't win the championship. They lost to South Haven Christian. And I know South Haven was invited and declined the invitation. And you also had a team, Hope Christian, come to the tournament. And they didn't win their championship either. I think that actually they had a little bit more of a struggle year, or maybe they played some 11 games. But in terms of your tournament, what are your feelings on? Obviously, it's not ideal, but what are your feelings on having teams that don't win their state championship come down to the tournament?
Obviously, we'd like to have the top teams come to the tournament. We invite them. We try and get to them early enough for them to make that decision. But usually by the time they get to that time of the year, again, I've had the biggest excuse has been hey, we've got basketball, and the basketball coach is the AD, and so he's already scheduled a tournament for right at the weekend after the football season's over and things like that. So we've run into that with a number of teams that have been up there, at the top of the rankings, and not a whole lot you can do about it. I mean, we try, but at the same time, it's not in our hands as to making that decision.
What are your feelings about? And I'm not gonna harp on this too much, but what are your feelings about the situation of course, Christian Community winning the tournament and being national champions because they won a national tournament is my understanding. But then the state champions maybe don't agree with that because they're saying if you can't win state, how can you be national champions? So what are your thoughts?
I think that's exactly what you have is they decided on the field, but again, it's a selection process. So you're getting teams that may not be the 4 best teams, but they're perceived as being up there in the top. With a tournament like ours, because of the factors of different states having different, their tournaments during that time, our process is such that it is until the last minute and say, okay, hopefully we can get 4 teams or the top four teams or whatever, we would stand to run into a situation where have the tournament because we don't get to commit or open the tournament to teams, and hopefully they're coming on the basis of they know that they're having a good season. They want to reward their players with an opportunity to compete at that national level. And again, we've been fortunate to have a couple of the top teams each year. Hopefully, we get more that might look at this as their opportunity on a yearly basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you guys turning to kind of before the tournament, you guys release rankings, and you've started doing it. You did a few years ago, but this year, just kind of putting together a little bit more. And of course, we've been reporting your rankings. But talk about the folks who are involved with maybe making the rankings and reviewing the teams and figuring out what order to put them in. A lot of people, I know an example here, a lot of people were wondering why a team like Bowling Green Christian at 4-1 was below a team from Alabama, maybe that was 2-2, I think, or 3-2. And a lot of people didn't understand that. So just talk about the committee that kind of orders the rankings and the process that y'all go through to come up with those.
Well, again, part of it is looking at it from a standpoint of who they're playing. When you get down to wins and losses, obviously it's who you're played, how strong they are. There's, like you said, there's a couple of teams that have played 11-man games, and in the 11-man games, they haven't done so well. Maybe they've lost one or two games. And so therefore, look at, okay, here's our record against 11-man, here's our record against 8-man. Exactly how do they stack up against 8-man teams? And so you really get into having to research rosters and look at personnel and look, great thing about what you guys do at 8-man Extreme is to broadcast get your one or two games a weekend. And so you can go on there and look at those games to see the two teams that are playing, see how they stack up, see who they've played, see how they've done against these other teams. So it gives us a broader picture of the quality of the teams and the competitiveness of those teams. And then, we've got some history go by in terms of having seen different states and how they stack up and how they traditionally do. Not to say that, there can't be a big group of seniors and this year's their year, and you start evaluating them and maybe they get a little bit higher because of the fact that they've got a mature team, one with a lot of experience, and therefore, maybe the reason why they're undefeated or they've only lost one game is because of that senior-led team. So that factors into a little bit of it in terms of to say, okay, what kind of roster do they have and how do they look in terms of going against stiffer competition versus weaker competition.
All right. So you've had teams from several different states, but if you had to look over the time of the tournament, is there a state that really sticks out to? And obviously, I'm not trying to be a homer here, based in Tennessee, but is there a state that kind of sticks out in terms of quality of play, or even not so much in the tourney, but just throughout the regular season and maybe the number of teams that have really good years?
I will say this, I watch Tennessee a lot because you guys broadcast them, so I'm familiar with a lot of the Tennessee teams, and a number of the Tennessee teams have come to the tournament in the past. South Haven, Sacred Heart, Community, and their programs, and then obviously I am familiar with a lot of the Alabama teams as well, and I know their brand of football is pretty competitive as well. They actually have two leagues, so it's a situation there where some of them don't quite play each other. So for them, we're starting to get a little more some of those teams and coming down there. I refer back to the Georgia teams, and back when they used to come, I know they were very competitive. Love to have some of their teams come down as well. So Florida, we've had interest, even teams as far north as Michigan, and then over into Oklahoma, like I said before, that have either come or have expressed interest in coming. So I think as far as 8-man, I think overall, though Tennessee is very competitive with everybody that they've faced.
Couple quick fire questions. Best championship game that I'm not going to ask you to rank them, but best championship game or just right off the top of your head that you thoroughly enjoyed watching.
I guess it has to be probably 2 years ago. They were just a phenomenal group because they had that senior quarterback who could throw the ball around. They had receiving core, and of course they had their hands full in who they played and in the game because it came down to they got the 2-point conversion as well to win it. So
you've had a ton of players come through this tournament. Is there even just one that maybe sticks out in your mind, whether it's how they played in the tournament or maybe they went on to play college ball? Because with more and more we're seeing guys, 8-man football players going and playing college and even going to the NFL, even past that. Is there any one player that sticks out maybe?
The Vincent kid.
Xavier Vincent.
Yeah, Xavier Vincent. I mean, I thought he definitely should be playing college ball, and I thought he was one of the outstanding players that had been to the tournament. It was good to hear about him.
Have y'all had any crazy weather games?
Fortunately, we have not. It's where it's been hot and sunny. We've had a bit of rain that came in, but it wasn't a downpour or a drench. For the most part, that tends to be the case down in Panama City, where if you go, you're going to get probably 3 days of good weather and maybe one day where it's either overcast or it rains a little bit, or you get that afternoon shower that comes for an hour or so and then it's gone.
We've seen the rankings that you guys put out on Monday. So real quick, can you give us maybe like a personal top 4 that you would like to see come to the tournament, or maybe a couple teams you would like to see there for sure?
Yes. I would really, obviously I'd love to see a Tennessee representative. And at this particular point, there's a lot more football to be played with Christian Community still being unbeaten at this point and having come down there last year. They are the reigning champs. And so we'd love to have them down again. Alabama, Evangel Christian, they sort of play a dual schedule now. So it's not clear, and they have expressed interest in it. I thought the team from Louisiana, they were going to come down a couple of years ago. They were undefeated. Her coach had expressed interest in coming down, actually came down for the tournament, even though he didn't bring the team, came down and said, hey, we're coming next year. And I guess during the off season, he got a job offer from another place and ended up leaving. And so they didn't follow up that next year, but they're undefeated right now. I'd love to have them come down. Then there's a team out of Oklahoma called Destiny Christian, and they pretty much have dominated their league out there in the Midwest 10 or more years. I mean, they have perennially been the team to beat, and I think they've won so many state championships. Had talked with them about it, and again, that their tournament actually is on the same week that ours starts. Not sure that they're ever going to be able to put that together. I don't know if anything's changed. It doesn't look like it's changed for this year.
Well, maybe sounds like also so that our All-Star game doesn't conflict with your tournament, maybe we move it back a weekend. I know you have the 11-man tournament, so a lot of wheels moving in that, but Well, Mr. St. Dennis, I really, really appreciate you coming on, and I've really enjoyed talking some eight-man football with you. And good luck with your tournament this year. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on it.
Appreciate talking to you. Thanks for the invitation anytime. And like I said, I do follow your broadcast, and I appreciate that because that's something that really helps us out as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a great time talking to Mr. St. Dennis, and I've had a conversation with him before last year, but I actually learned some new stuff from talking to him and just getting to know his thoughts and just kind of picking his brain about different topics. He's a great guy, and obviously he's put a lot of work into something that I'm very passionate about. And so I really I admire him. I'm looking forward to the tournament in November and who ends up going down there, especially from Tennessee. Of course, things still kind of wide open, really. You got two unbeaten teams in the South. You've got Christian Community, who's undefeated. And the Christian Community and the South teams are not going to intersect until we get to the playoffs. And so it'll definitely be interesting to find out how those teams combine. But I am stoked. I am excited about checking out the Lancaster web game that's going to happen tomorrow night. That is a massive showdown. That's one of the biggest showdowns I can remember in recent history just because of the implications from it. But I don't know. It's going to be great. I hope you go find a game tomorrow night. I hope you go check one out. And if you've got your school that you go to, go root for them, whether they're traveling or not. This is one of the only 2 weeks in the season that all 13 teams are playing a game. So no matter if you're up north in White House or Ashland City, Springfield area in Antioch, whether you're down south in Fayetteville or Bell Buckle, no matter what, go find you a game. Or if you're in Franklin for the Battle of Franklin, go find a game, go watch, go check it out. You will not be sorry that you did it. And I know I enjoy just going to games and just watching them. Like I was able to do this last Saturday. So it's really a great thing. But thank you so much for checking out this podcast, this episode, this show, whatever you want to call it. Go check out some of the other stuff on the YouTube channel. Don't be a stranger. Make sure you get the bell on so that and subscribe so that you know exactly when new videos come out. Whenever we go live for broadcast, you'll have the notification and you can click and watch immediately. And also for whenever we release our highlight video. But anyways, I hope y'all have a great night and let's play some football. See ya!